in North India, in Delhi, the sort of North Indian belt around Delhi alone, in English, a language not spoken by a very large number of people outside of the capital's elite in that area, broadcasting in Hindi, and then latterly, in the last 5 or 6 years, broadcasting in the languages of migrants to the cities. So you have television channels that are broadcasting in the languages of people who've come from elsewhere in India, in the cities of India where other languages were traditionally spoken as mother tongues. This has really made a huge difference to Indian politics. It's quite evident now that Indian politics, like politics in America, Britain and elsewhere, is driven by the television news studio, by the live and continuous strap that goes underneath a breaking political story. It's quite obvious that Indian political parties, Indian actors in every sense of the political stage, activists and people who represent various shades of opinion or reactions to certain developments, tailor-make their ideas and their messages to get it out on these television channels, because that is how one does it. That is exactly how the message reaches the largest number of people, like it or not. Again, it's a case of India becoming, much like liberal democracies in the rest of the world, only more so because there are more channels, more furious activity, and more pressure, more competition on the purveyors of this news to get it out there to people. When I talk to students, when I do teaching in India and South Asian countries, Afghanistan as well, Nepal, I like to refer to television in the contemporary world as instant infrastructure. I don't know if it's my phrase or not. I doubt it. I'm a journalist. I usually find things that someone else has said and claim credit for it. In this case, I can't even do that because I don't know who said it. But instant infrastructure. Infrastructure in the truest sense of the word. A network that links together a disparate polity, a disparate geographic reality as a public service, however it's privately or however it's funded, and continues to persist as something that holds people together, bonds them together, gives them away, like railways in the old days, like canals, like hydroelectricity networks in North America, electricity networks in general, infrastructure. But in this case, it's instant infrastructure. Not that it can be built overnight, but its impact almost happens overnight once it is built. I always sort of harken back to the day in 1989 when I was wandering around India as a backpacker. And I was taking a bus between Shimla in the hills and Hardwar, which is in the plains on the very edge of the Himalayas, where the Ganges debouches from the mountains and into the North Indian plain. The Gangetic plains begin. In those days it was a 12-hour journey, a really sort of rough, epic, bouncy, crazy journey through every type of Indian landscape you can imagine, save the sort of coastal tropics. It was wonderful. And I was pretty much accustomed to these long journeys, quite liked them. I was a connoisseur of discomfort. So I would sit and doze and read and just watch what was going on around me. Put my watch in my pocket because to monitor the time was to make the journey much, much worse. And the driver, like so many other drivers, was in the habit of stopping frequently for tea, for chai. And all of us would pile out and have a tea with him. And that would, of course, necessitate further stops, all of the tea that was taken on. So we stopped quite a bit, and one could really get out and see what was going on. But one stop I remember was very different because the bus was lurching along and it was getting increasingly frantic, and not everyone had taken off their watches, and certainly the driver was aware at the time. He was glancing at the clock and looking at his watch, and finally the coach sort of lurched to a stop in front of a rickety-looking restaurant underneath some acacia trees by the side of the road. It was in the plains at this point. It was quite hot, so the restaurant was in the shade, which was a thankful thing. And so everyone on the coach, which I think went by the name Long Distance Easy Video EZ Comfort Coach, leapt to their feet and scrambled. They ran to get off, just really pushing and shoving. And so I sat back and I thought, oh God, a lot of tea went down various throats today. And I wandered over to the restaurant after everyone had got off because they were in much more need than I was. And went in and found them all clustered around a black and white television set, quite a small one up on the counter. It was crackling away and there was a set of rabbit ears on top. And the signal was horrible and the sound wasn't very good, but you could see the action on the screen. It was pretty impressive action. There were what looked to be heroic mythic figures cavorting, and a lot of dialogue, and arrows flying to and fro in what was obviously a battle. And I really did not know what was going on. I was young, and I'd done some of my reading, but I in the manner of things, I'd not really read about contemporary reality. I'd read about history and the freedom struggle, and before that, and Ramila Thapar and prehistory, and so I felt really comfortable with that, but I didn't really understand contemporary culture in India. So a man turned to me and saw that I was puzzled and said, Mahabharata, it's the episode where Krishna talks to Arjuna, so shh, and so I sat and watched with them. Now, of course, I know, as we all do, about the seminal impact of this television series, the Mahabharata and Ramayana before it, and also, the realms of academic material, journalism, and just plain bizarre talk, gossip, and joy that has been spawned by these series. 95-part series, both of them, I believe, roughly, give or take a few episodes. Full of superlative statistics, the most watched television program ever, seen by something like 98% of the world's Hindus. I saw that on the internet. I don't know how they proved that, but it sounds plausible because on that day I saw buses and indeed that entire part of the world creep to a halt. There were no VCRs kicking around then except in the homes of the rich and well-off in Delhi and Mumbai and elsewhere. So people had to watch it when it came out, and they did. Hundreds of millions every episode. Remarkable. But that laid the groundwork for the televisual culture that is India today, I think, along with, of course, the films that come out of the film cultures in Mumbai and Tamil Nadu and other parts of India, often mistakenly described as Bollywood, but actually, just India's marvelous film culture. The Mahabharata transferred it, in my mind, to television, made people aware that television could draw them together the same way the cinema screen had in generations previous. Television news, I think, has taken over these days in India amongst many sectors of society, from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, from the silver screen of Bombay cinema and the other cinemas of India, in a way that no one could have possibly predicted. Who would have thought back then, 1989, when these black and white shows, they weren't originally done in black and white, I think, but I saw it on a black and white TV first, that when these shows were coming out, that this would be supplanted by television news, a la CNN, a la BBC World, and these days Al Jazeera and others. But that's exactly what has happened. The instant infrastructure of television news has bonded together the sort of amazing aspirations of not just the Indian middle class, but the aspiring middle class in India, the rural working class that wants the same things that the middle class wants in a way: education for children, decent services at home, reliable services, and government that is responsive, transparent, fairly clean, and not a burden on their daily lives. Everyone in India wants these things. They just want them from different vantage points of classic economics, geography, and so on. And I think that television news is probably the only thing in the country right now that is really mediating between the people who can deliver those services at the government level, at the corporate level, at the international level, and the people who actually want those things. Every time I go back to India and visit my friends there, either to write a book or just to go to a party or to go to one of their book launches, I hear them telling me that the explosion in news is all a dumbing down, a cheapening of the great glories of Indian journalism, which are many. The Indian press, even now, I rank as among the world's best, at its world-beating best. But I would reply, and I do reply to them, that you have to take the not-so-good with the very, very good. And you also have to accept that the infrastructure is in place for this to be improved upon and for the services you want to be created. Television is not an infrastructure that is obviously by, for, and of the people, because its entry level is so high. If you want to build a television network, you need access to vast sums of capital, as I said earlier, or you need to have a corporate partner. But that is a cost that has come down amazingly. It's quite remarkable. I spent a lot of time in Nepal, which, by any measure is one of the poorest countries in Asia. Yet it too